Hello, everybody. We're live for the first time. This is Katie from Starling. We're doing some artist Q&As for our Creative Industries Insight program, which is for neurodivergent young people around employability and building skills and looking at working in the creative industries. So I'm just going to invite the lovely Rebecca from Maywild Studios. And we're going to have a little interview with her about her work and her practice. So, we've got some people live, which is fantastic. Hello to everybody. I'll just wait for Rebecca to join. Hello.
Hello. Let's turn my phone up a little bit, I think.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Fantastic. So we're live. We've got some lovely people joining us. Hello to everyone who's come on for us. Welcome. So I just explained to everybody that we are doing these lives as part of our Creative Industries Insights program, which is for neurodivergent young people. And we're talking to you because we've been working with them to get some questions together for you about how you got into your work and a little bit about your journey. So I've got a big list of questions. We might not get through them all, but we'll give it a go.
Okay.
So welcome. So our first question is about, basically, tell us a little bit more about you and your work and what you do.
Okay. Well, I am part of a creative practice called Maywild Studio. So I'm one half of it. I'm Rebecca May. And the other half is Michael Wild, my partner. So Maywild Studio, that's where the name comes from. It's a collaboration of the two of us coming together. We both come from slightly different backgrounds, I suppose. Michael probably more fine art and myself more design-led. I am actually a second careerist, and by that I mean I had a first career. So I'm a bit older going into the creative industries. I was first a building surveyor, and I was really wanting to pursue a creative career from a very young age. So for me, it was always there, but I had to sort of grow myself and become more confident to pursue it. So eventually I did, and I studied ceramics. And that really is the base of our practice. We're both ceramicists, we both work in clay, but we also work in lots of other materials. And that has really opened up lots of opportunities for us, and it allows us to work really creatively. We get to work on lots of varied projects, so lots of education, lots of workshops, installation, art projects, everything. And that's how we like it.
Amazing, sound very good. So one of the was really interested, well, actually quite a few of the young people were interested in who or what inspired you to kind of move towards a creative career.
Well, I think when you're creative, it's kind of in you, in a way, and it's really about sort of making sure that you find a way to do it. That's how I would see it. So it's kind of there anyway. But I've always been inspired by everything around me that's creative. So I kind of feed into everything. And I think even if it's not around you, you can find it. And, so I didn't grow up necessarily in a creative environment or even in a creative place, but I would find ways of finding something creative. And that may have been out in nature. So I often used to love being out in nature and finding things that I was quite drawn to, like patterns and textures and surfaces. Another big thing for me actually is also where I lived. When I was a teenager, the small town I grew up in had not many, particularly cultural places to go, but I went to charity shops and I used to go around them and buy old design, so anything that had sort of retro at the time, because I'm older. Had no idea, didn't know anything about it, but I was very drawn to clearly design at an early age and objects. I didn't know why, but it was my sort of creative outlet, I suppose. And I learned a lot through it. I sort of still have those things around me now that I didn't know anything about then. So these things really started me on my creative journey. And in many ways, they led me then to, I suppose, the more obvious routes would be galleries, you know, and looking at art and paintings and all sorts of creativity. Now we've got an amazing array of, you know, we can see amazing creativity through TV programs, through films, through digital arts. You know, that wasn't as accessible to me at the time. It was probably more traditional routes like paintings and things like that, and sculpture. But yeah, I would say that was my kind of route in. Does that make sense?
Brilliant. So it's like underneath that you didn't really realize you have that creativity running through you, and it came.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. It was kind of like you find your way and then eventually it leads to other things, you know. So I would have found objects that I liked and then I would have wanted to explore those more and find out what it was about, and it led me to other things then. And that's how maybe I found out about paintings and you know, going to a gallery and moving out of the place where I lived and going and exploring, you know, cities and things like that.
Fantastic. So some of the young people were interested in the kind of decision making around starting your own business. And what was that moment that you decided, right, this is the time to do it? And talk a bit about that process. That'd be really interesting.
I think it's, for us, it was a really life-changing moment, actually. You know, I think as our collaboration came together, it was gradual, and then we sort of took a leap. I suppose that's the way I would describe it, because we felt there was no other route for us. We felt very much like we had to give our creative careers a go. It is not an easy route to go down sometimes, you know. So for us, it was really a sort of gradual process of learning and getting experience and trying things out, making mistakes, you know, and finally getting ourselves in a position to take a leap, giving ourselves a bit of support as well to do that. So it was quite calculated in many ways. It was quite planned, because we were older, we had a mortgage to pay, you know, so we had responsibilities. So that was our way of taking a leap into a creative career, even though we both had creative experience in our backgrounds. To actually form a business took a lot of planning and thought, really, you know. And I wish I could have a bit more of a, you know, a sort of fun answer, you know, to that. But actually, it's, you know, of course it came from the heart. Of course it came from making things and all of that experience, and it came from risk taking as well. And I do need to make a point about that. It came from an idea that would spark and we jump on it, do it, take a risk, and then it kind of gave us the confidence to go a step further, you know.
And you talk a little bit about support networks or people around you. Was there a particular way that you formed those kind of support networks?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's very important to network with other, and actually what's really important is to hear other people's stories. And I think sometimes it's really easy to observe from a distance, especially through social media, and think everybody, you know, has got that creative career because they did this and it came this way or this way. It's very easy to make assumptions, and actually when you scratch behind the surface, you'll find out the stories behind that journey, you know, and how they got there. And actually they're often very kind of complex or, you know, varied, and there's usually a lot of work, you know, and there's usually a really unusual route, you know, so there's all sorts. So those stories and talking to people and finding out is actually a really good way to give you that sort of, those ideas about how you're going to do it. It gives you a reality check, and that's really important, but it also gives you that push to do it as well, you know. So yeah, networks around you are really important. Your community, the people locally around you, spread a bit further, and just sort of have those conversations, I think, definitely.
Fantastic. So one of our young people is really interested about your education and how you developed your practice through going to maybe study ceramics or however you managed to get into your work. So could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I can definitely. So I was already in a career, as you know. I'd been to university and gone through quite a traditional route in that sense. Um, when I wanted to go into the creative industries, I wanted to train and do art and design and retrain. Actually, I had to start again. So I had no portfolio. Um, I didn't have anything like that, but I needed to get qualifications. I couldn't get onto a degree, even though I had a degree, I couldn't get onto another degree without an art qualification. So I actually went down the route of a foundation, an art and design foundation. And because I was working, because I was a mature student, I had to try and find one that was part time, that would have me, basically. I had to rustle together some creative work. So I did night classes to try and put together a portfolio. So I'd go to evening classes, I'd sit at home, and I'd just do all sorts really to build up some kind of portfolio to prove that I was creative and that I could do it. At the time, I didn't have a lot of confidence. You know, I didn't feel I was any good. I knew I was creative inside and I wanted to be an artist, and I'd taken a leap to do it, but I didn't actually know if I was any good. You know, because I hadn't had any kind of art training, hadn't done anything, you know, so I was going in completely blank in a way. And these classes that I used to go to, I just used to join any evening class or any class I could and create something. And I gradually was building up bits of work, gaining confidence myself, learning skills, and eventually I could take something to this foundation course and show them, you know, and get on, really get on the course. And they very very kindly really let me sort of work out a part-time way of doing it, because I was still working as a building surveyor. I couldn't leave my job, I had bills to pay, so I had to balance the both of them. And that then led me to a university degree, you know. So I did my foundation, did it for 2 years, and I then got into on a university degree, and I was very focused on art and fine art, and but actually I was obsessed with 3D and anything sculptural. As soon as I got my hands on plaster and clay, I loved it, and that led me to 3D design, and that was the route for me. So I have a very fine art element to what I do, an arty element to it, but the outcomes are 3D. So I went to 3D design because I wanted to learn that skill. I wanted to learn that craft.
Fantastic. Fantastic, really, really interesting. we were also talking about with our group about neurodiversity and how that has come through your work, your own neurodivergence, and you know how that impacts on what you do, and how it might have impacted on your life as well, because it's kind of all interrelated. So it'd be interesting to hear about that.
Yeah, I would say that being neurodivergent. Now, I'm a bit older, so for me, when I was young, it was spotted, but not diagnosed. So I sort of went through big chunks of my life struggling in areas, really. And certainly when I got to my first career, there were things I found quite difficult and had to just try my best to overcome. I would say it was really my creative career that really allowed me to understand really how my mind worked, you know, and how I see things differently, and really see the positives in that. And interestingly, when I went on the Art and Design Foundation, one of the tutors there had experience about dyslexia and dyspraxia, and she spotted straight away that I was dyslexic, and she told me to get a test, and they actually set one up. So I actually was re-diagnosed again as when I was older, and it was actually a quite a life-changing moment for me, because I'd struggled before then and almost hidden my dyslexia. And then it almost was like I had this change of career. I came out creatively, was diagnosed, and I suddenly felt that it was okay to speak about it. But also I realised that that way of seeing things, that way of understanding things is actually really okay. It's a benefit, and it's a really important part of being creative, and lots of creatives are neurodivergent. You know, there's a high percentage, and it's been proved statistically. There's a reason for that, and that's because these skills and these ways of seeing are actually quite, I believe, quite special, you know, and not everyone has them. So for me, my life's been in two parts in a way, and now I embrace it, you know, and I accept the things I feel I can't always do that well, and I use it to my advantage in my creative areas, and I just go for it.
Fantastic.
Is that good?
Very inspiring. Fantastic. So we were looking at your website and what you have been doing, all the recent projects you've been up to, and we had a few questions about the kind of process of making your art. So there are two specific ones that we were particularly interested in. One was the Coo birds that you have in Manchester. Maybe talk a little bit more about that. Our young people were really interested in the actual process of making the bird. You can obviously see the birds on your Instagram and on your website. So if anyone watching is interested, your Maywile Studio, is that right? At Maywile Studio. So yeah, they were interested to hear about that project and how you physically make these beautiful birds.
Okay. The birds are actually, I would say, a very skillful piece. They really are a combination of both Michael and mine, our skills together. So I think they were a challenge for us, if I'm honest. You know, we really pushed every skill we had learned in ceramics, like sculptural skills, slip casting skills, glazing skills. You know, so all these things can design skills, you know, measuring skills, you know, and we really pulled everything we had together to make that bird. But the root of that bird was the story, you know, and it had this special story to us. The story and the concept was actually created by my partner, Michael, but the piece itself was actually, we came together and designed ourselves. So first we started purely with our hands, and we went very traditional. We could have actually created the original bird in 3D. We could have printed it in 3D, and it crossed our mind. We do work with different types of technology, but actually what we did is we came back to our hands and we sculpted it out of our hands, and we used traditional measuring techniques. So, you know, we're talking like paper, pen, scissors here, you know, and measuring tools. And we really went back to those very traditional methods, and we both worked from back to forth to sculpt it in our hands. It meant that it wouldn't be perfect. So there may not be absolute perfect symmetry, for example, but it also felt to us that those slight differences in perfection would make it feel handmade, you know, and it would almost connect us to it, and therefore connect people to it, if that makes sense. So we were pleased we went down what was a long route, but it sort of came out okay for us in the end, you know. And I think once we made that, what we call the mother mold, we create a plaster mold. So we created the first plaster mold and we cast it. And casting is really pouring in ceramic slip. So it sort of fills it and it becomes hollow, and then you take it out of the mold. And that process then speeds everything up. So the lengthy process was making the original, and then we can speed it up through the casting process. So that's what we do next. And then the next stage is when it comes out of the mold, it's really quite wet clay. We wait for it to dry, it goes in the kiln. There's lots of little things in between that we've perfected over the years to make it perfect, or to make it sort of stand up straight and do all these things that we feel it should do, or not crack, you know. And then it goes in the kiln, it's fired, it's glazed, and it comes out, it gets its little beak. We make those by hand as well. And eventually, you know, it's finished. So, you know, we learned an awful lot through that bird, and I think it pushed our skill level so much that I think after it we were almost like, I think we can make anything. You know, it pushed us to the limit in many ways, because it really ended up being quite a sort of you know, a really well finished piece. But it was a really good challenge, and we learned a lot from it. That's how I would describe it. You know, we went on a real journey with it, And afterwards it sort of opened doors for us, I think, you know, to sort of making lots of other ways.
And was that, what project was that part of?
It was just our own project at the beginning, and then it sort of we ended up launching it in London at a London Design Festival, and then over time we make them to order, so they're not a mass-produced piece. We only make them to order, so people will order them directly from us. And occasionally because we do other work around them, they're not the only piece of work we do, we exhibit them too. So 50 Windows is a really good example, actually. And it's been lovely to sort of, in many ways, bring them back out, you know, and give them a showcase, because the story actually originated in Manchester. So for us to exhibit them in Manchester was quite important. So yeah.
Are they still on in exhibition, or have they been taken down?
No, it's actually on till, it's been extended actually because of lockdown during November. The 50 Windows, you can now go, you know, you can actually walk around Manchester because restrictions have been lifted, and it's on until I think the 14th of December. So all of those 50 Windows creativity in Manchester, you can now go and explore. You can use the app and walk around, and ours is at Noma, it's at Sadler's Yard in Manchester, and you can have a look at them in the window. They're there for a couple of more weeks until we have to take them down.
Fantastic. And then you also have another window display in another Greater Manchester location, and we were interested in the process of making the owls that you created as well. Could you tell us a bit more?
We've only just finished that project, so excuse me, I'm full of a cold and cough today, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, that project we've just finished. We've been working quite intensively on that project actually for the last week, and it's actually ended up being a really special project for us because we live here. We live in Saddleworth in Oldham. Michael is from Oldham, so we were very, very pleased to win this commission, and we put a lot into the proposal for it. We wanted to connect a story to it, and the owl is all about the Oldham owl. It's the symbol of Oldham, and that's where it comes from. We wanted to think about our current times and community and unity, and therefore we created all of these owls around a sort of light in a way. It's like paper and lights. That's where that idea came from. And there's over 200 owls, and they represent the population of Oldham. So there's over 200,000 people in Oldham, and that's where we got the number of owls from. So that's really, we started to create this story behind the work. And once Michael and I create the idea and the concept and the story, that's when we can just go with everything else then. And usually once we've got past that, we sort of jump onto how we're going to create the piece itself, you know. And Oldham had a brief, you know, they wanted it to be magical and festive, you know, and that's a lovely brief, you know. So we were like, well, that's fantastic, you know. We get to, it's quite open in many ways, so we get to create the story, but we have to wrap it in something magical. So that's really what we were thinking when we did it, you know. And it has to also have our stamp on it a bit as well, you know. So we're bringing in lots of things there, but when you get the story for something, or the idea or the concept, and when it sort of comes from a real place, I always think, you know, it comes from something that's meaningful maybe, or it's a story, it can be a little part of you, a part of the community you live in, and you pull that together, it really then sort of turns into, you know, the piece of work you want it to be. That's how we try to do it anyway. So yeah.
And that's in Oldham? That's
in Oldham. It's actually in Spindle Shopping Centre. It's on until January. There's some amazing windows actually. We haven't had a chance to look round them. We've been looking at a few. So there's a graffiti artist, I think it's a group of graffiti artists called Reform, have done an amazing window as well at Oldham Art Gallery. So yeah, there's some great windows, so I'll wander around there.
Great. And young people were also interested in what advice you would give them if they want to start out in the creative industries, in any creative industry. What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I think I feel bad saying it's not easy, because I suppose that's because of access to opportunities. And that can sometimes be a bit difficult. I mean, I'm thinking of an example in my head actually of a graduate that worked for, like, they came and worked at a pop-up gallery that Michael and I had. So I think she's quite a good example of, you know, how you can start off your career in the creative industries, you know, and because I felt that she really put her sort of foot in lots of different parts and did her best to sort of get her experience, you know. So she came and actually did some work for us, and we'd put out a call out for one exhibition we were doing, and we wanted somebody to come in and get some experience and help with it, and that's how we met her. And at the time, she was also volunteering for 2 other organisations. So she started volunteering, and that really helped build up experience. And that led to paid work as well. You know, paid work is obviously very, very important, and it should be paid anyway. But the reality is that sometimes you have to get the experience, and that may not always be paid. And in the arts, you know, so for her, she did volunteer at various places, but it did lead to work as well, you know. So I think she was quite a good example, really, of just applying for everything, asking people, approaching people, getting experience, you know, and keeping going, really, you know, trying her best to set up her own studio, joining a collaborative and a cooperative, you know, so that you're sharing your materials, you're sharing your spaces. So there are lots of different routes in. And I think it really is a case of trying all of them and getting as much experience as you can, networking, you know, and yeah, I think that's as much as I can say, really.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but let me have a look at my questions. One of the questions was around your highlight. If you had a highlight of your career, what would it be?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think, really. I would say the project we've just done for both of us has been a bit of a highlight. I think it's been obviously a very difficult year for lots of people. Lots of creatives have struggled. We've lost work, you know, and I think in many ways that project, to do something that we feel, you know, has an element of beauty to it in a way, an element of fun to it. You know, it's been a nice project to work on at the end of a year that's been a bit as well, you know. So trying to find light in a time that's been a bit tricky, you know, been huge positives. I'm going to say my role coming to Starling has been a real positive as well, because, you know, out of a situation where we would have lost work or had work cancelled, freed up or as well time to do other things as well, you know, and so those opportunities may not have even been seen had it been a normal year, you know. So that's the way I would say, you know, if it had been our normal year and we'd been booked up till, you know, March next year, we wouldn't have had a chance to look at other things. So it's been quite special for me to connect to your organisation, and, you know, it's helped me and as well, and it's given me a chance to sort of work with other people in a time when, you know, it's quite isolated as well. You know, a lot of people become isolated. So I would say those two at the moment have been real highlights for me this year.
Fantastic. That's really good to hear. So we're coming to the end now. It's been really lovely to chat to you. And we're going to keep this interview on our Instagram, record it, and send it to those people that haven't been able to join us live. But if people are interested in looking at your work a little more, could you tell us, like, your Instagram, your Facebook, and your website address and all of that?
Of course, we are at Maywild Studio on all of our social media. So that is Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is the one we use. That's the one we kind of update, and you see more recent things that we've done. Our website is www.maywildstudio.com, and there is more portfolio of our work, a little bit about us. But for more recent and updated stuff, we would mostly use our Instagram, which is @MayWild Studio.
Exciting times. Okay, well, we will leave it there, but thank you so much for joining
thank you.
me, and thank you for answering all these questions from our young people. We will chat to you soon, and we look forward to having you in our workshops in Tameside in the new year, and hopefully in the future as well. So very nice to see you.
And you too. Look forward to next year when we meet the group in Tameside. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.